Sorry about that. A student had a Teams meeting with me and they called me 30 minutes early, which took me by surprise. I apologize for that. So I was saying something about the thought experiment. So you cannot change the facts of the thought experiment. Even if you disagree with something or you don't like something about it, the thought experiment, you cannot change it. So one thing I want to make sure you don't do is do not evade or ignore or try to turn away from the specifics of the thought experiment. I must see attention to the thought experiment, explicit attention. You must actually mention things that are mentioned in the thought experiment in a sufficient manner. I've had students say things like, well, this shouldn't even be discussed. This shouldn't even be up for debate. Anything that I present to you is something that should be discussed, can be discussed, is debated. And so this is a platform for us to learn how to do that. You might not like it. You might not agree with me, but it is something that can be debated. And of course, the fact that somebody says, oh, well, this shouldn't be debated, this shouldn't be discussed. Well, even that claim can be debated and discussed. Well, why shouldn't it be debated? I want to debate and discuss with you why you think it shouldn't be discussed and be debated. Simply saying that something should not be discussed or debated is not an argument, right? That's just a belief. If you want to try to convince me that something shouldn't be discussed or debated, you can certainly try, but then you have to give me reasons. That said, it's very hard to do. In fact, we could almost try to formulate a maxim about that and whether we could universalize that. Is it possible that we could end up not discussing anything or debating anything? Interesting. Okay, so moving on. The main point right here is you cannot change the thought experiment and you cannot say anything that contradicts the thought experiment. You're to take everything in the thought experiment as a fact that cannot be changed, at least in our alternative universe. Now, if you need to fill in information, if you need to add a few details because, you're like, okay, well, to give this answer, I need to assume X, Y, and Z. Yes, you can do that. But it must be consistent with or not contradict or change the facts of the thought experiment. Okay, so moving on. So nothing about any theory you have learned is common knowledge. Therefore, I should see internal citations in your response, even as you provide your own take on the matter. See more specific requirements below. So you are giving your personal reaction to the question at issue in light of the thought experiment. I'm not asking you to tell me what conclusion or how would Kant answer the question in terms of would he say that, would he tell the truth or not, or what anybody. You get to tell me, how you would back up the conclusion you have chosen. That said, you do have to pull from a moral theory in part of your reasoning. So one thing I want to warn you guys about is plagiarism, intentional or not. I do not make a distinction between intentional plagiarism and unintentional plagiarism. Since week 1, I think it was via step 7 or 8, I have emphasized, and even in the contract, emphasized how important it is for your work to be original. And when you're paraphrasing, alluding to, referencing, mentioning, or quoting from anything in the class, how important it is for you to use the MLA expectations when it comes to doing internal citations, citing your sources, properly noting where you're getting those ideas from. So on that note, this is so important to remember. None of the stuff that you've learned in this class, none of the stuff in the ebook, none of the stuff in the lecture videos, none of it's more common knowledge. Therefore, if you even mention something about utilitarianism, if you even mention something about Kant, even if you're paraphrasing it, you have to tell me where you've got that information from. And the only sources that you can use for this discussion board are the chapters from your ebook, and depending on what you choose, it's going to be the Kant chapter, and or the video that you read, that you followed for Kant. Okay, so keep that in mind as well, that there are only so many resources, and we'll go over what you can use. But part of your reasoning will include attention to moral theory, and you will have to cite that. So what I recommend is when you're done writing your paragraph, look and see did you say something about right and wrong that you might have gotten from a chapter or a lecture video, even if you think you came up with it on your own. Even if you just kind of vaguely remember reading about it, that's not enough to say that's common knowledge. You're going to have to go back and say, okay, did I get this idea maybe from this chapter? Well, let me go to the chapter, then find the chapter, you'll probably find the idea you're thinking of and then go ahead and cite it. It's better to oversight and cite too much, do too many internal citations than not enough. Now, there are going to be sentences that you don't have internal citations for because you're giving some of the reasoning is your own, you're presenting your own ideas. But when it comes to the moral theory component, a requirement that I go over in a minute, you are going to have internal citations. So if you do something like say this, this is a duty that we have that is the same for everyone. Well, that's not common knowledge. Even the idea of a duty, that insofar as it's tied to moral theory in Kant, is not common knowledge. So if he said something like, well, Kant thinks duties are important, that's not common knowledge. Show me where in the reading it says that's important. Okay, so, and guys, what I'm doing right here is I really don't want to reject your discussion board topic response, but I have rejected, and every time I have this kind of assignment and students submit a topic response, I reject on the whole out of 3 sections, 5 to 6 responses because quotation marks weren't used around words that were lifted, an internal citation was not given for something that was paraphrased. Even if you quote something, you still need an internal citation, but you know all that. I'm not going to go over that kind of stuff. Just make sure that, if you cite an approved resource, whether it's a video or the ebook, that you are using the MLA style documentation and you can go back and get information from the week 1 orientation about that. Okay, so we're almost at the tail end of this. So now we're going to go over option specific. So this applies to everybody, of course. Everything that I've said so far applies to everybody. Now we're going to get into specifics. Let's say you chose option A. So option A was saying that you would fulfill the duty to tell the truth in responding to the question the investigator asked about Roberta. So if this is you, this is what you need to know. Some of your reasoning should include attention to what Kant says about doing the right things. In other words, use what you learned about Kant or what it means to think like him in the reasoning you give to support your conclusion. Okay, so sources you can use, and so you can write this in your notes. And by the way, if you want help with this, I'm more than happy to give it to you, but you first have to email me your detailed notes. So you don't have to write down everything that you've seen in the video, but I need to see that you've written down a lot of stuff, that, or at least some of the stuff that is in the video, and then some stuff that I presented only verbally. So for option A, and this could also go with option B, the sections that are relevant to what I'm asking you for would be the introduction to the Kant reading, which is chapter 6. Section A. Section A starts off by giving you examples and scenarios of what it means to think like Kant. You can still use that even though you can't say, well, Kant said this. You can say, well, if I was thinking like Kant, I might think, and then you could do a quote or a paraphrase of something you read in the introduction to chapter 6. The introduction gives you good context. It reminds you of what Kantian thinking is about in chapter 6. Section A is useful, and sections C and E are particularly useful, especially C and E in particular. Okay. You can also use the video that you watched following the Kant reading. Just make sure that you are citing and that you are not plagiarizing in any way. By now you should have watched at least one video about 8 or 10 different ways that you might plagiarize, and you don't want to plagiarize in any of those ways. Okay, so option B, we're almost there, guys. Option B, sub-option. So there's 2 strategies you can use for option B. So option B is I would not fulfill the duty to tell the truth. Okay, so if you think there is another duty that overrides the duty to tell the truth, name that duty and then give reasons as to why the duty you have identified should override the duty to tell the truth. At least one reason should include attention to what Kant says about doing the right thing in duty. So the sources that you can use for these parts to focus on is the same as option A, just so you know that. So basically, you still copy a sentence for this option. So you copy this one. And so what's really going on is this is going to be your final conclusion if you do option B. And then if you choose strategy B, double lower Roman I. Because then you're going to claim that there's another duty that's more important. So that becomes like a sub-conclusion. And then you have to give me reasons why it's more important to fulfill some other duty over the duty of telling the truth. Just make sure that you say something about duty, and this applies to option A as well, that you say something about duty or the categorical imperatives, and or morality and how it applies universally or to all people at all times. Okay, if you choose option B, again, you would not fulfill the duty to tell the truth. There's another option here. If you would not tell the truth and your reasons for that have nothing to do with Kant's theory, you need to explain on what moral grounds you would do so by giving reasons informed by utilitarianism or virtue ethics. So the sources you can use would be the chapter readings on virtue ethics and utilitarianism. I'm not going to tell you which sections to focus on. You should be familiar with those chapters by now, pretty familiar. But when you're looking for moral grounds or moral reasons, think about what does each of these theories say is most important in deciding whether something is right or wrong. What do each of these theories presuppose about the nature of human reality? You could use those questions to find answers in the reading and formulate 2 moral reasons for why you would not fulfill the duty to tell the truth if your reason for not fulfilling the duty to tell the truth has nothing to do with duty itself. So there's that. You can use, if you still, I don't think you have access to the lecture videos, but if you still do for some reason, like you copied the links to them, you can use the lecture videos that were presented in this course. You cannot use any videos that I have not already presented to you. But again, make sure you use internal citations. So this brings us to the last option. So the last option is option C, where you say it's not rational to claim a definite position. Like I said, I'm not going to redo a lecture on rationality and what it means to draw that kind of conclusion or defend it. Rather, I'm just going to tell you, how you go about giving reasons for that conclusion. So you present the conclusion. So you've already got one conclusion. And now what you want to do is you want to show that you can see 2 opposing sides. So that's one reason why it might not be rational for you to draw a definite conclusion about something. Because you can see opposing conclusions, and you can see that the reasoning for the conclusions are both, the reasoning on both sides is compelling. There's logical arguments on both sides of an issue, a debate, or a question, or a problem. So what you would do is you're going to present the 2 sides after your copied sentence. So you'd want to present the conclusion that you would tell the truth, and then at least 2 reasons why you would. At least 1 reason must be pulled from Kant's theory. So I'm giving you a template for here. So your second sentence would be then, like I want to, I think I might, or a reason why I might conclude, or I want to conclude that I would tell the truth. And then is because, then you give a reason as to why you would tell the truth. Or you could just say, I'm tempted to tell the truth, period. One reason being that, or a reason is, so the idea here is that you're doing an argument for one side, right? And then next, you present the conclusion that you would not tell the truth, and then at least 2 reasons why you would not. So then you're presenting the other side of the argument, the debate. So you explicitly state the conclusion for the other side of the debate, and then the reasons for that conclusion. When you're presenting at least one of the arguments on one side of the debate, I do want you to pull from Kant's theory, and the resources you can use to do so are those that I went over in these 2 options here.